Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast. I'm your host, Shaquille Barmel. I'm the CEO of Ocean Blue Strategic and partner with the Summit Group. I'm a coach, consultant, and speaker, and I help leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals make an impact through improved performance. In this podcast, I share insights and interviews with interesting leaders to define practical lessons that you can use to make an impact in the face of uncertainty. We are proud to be supported by the Summit Group, helping companies to increase revenue, deepen customer relationships by moving from sales excellence to business relevance through transformative and engaging learning experiences. She's not the typical person you imagine when you think about a career accountant. Farah Bundeali is a partner with global accounting firm KPMG. Her emphasis on leadership and care for people may come from her role as the HR lead on the KPMG audit management team, but more than likely it comes from lessons from her parents. In this conversation, she shares the influence of her dad in shaping her career ambitions, how long it took her to feel settled in her career choice, and most importantly, her view on how leaders can put their own and their team's mental health front and center. Enjoy the conversation. Hi, Farah. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So one of the things I've been doing in various meetings I've had with people is I've asked them on a scale of 1 to 10 how they're feeling today, 10 being outstanding and 1 being, yeah, I'm a little bit anxious. What would your number be today?
I'll be surprised if you ever get a 10 because that just feels wrong.
Yeah.
But I would say I'm still at a 7 or 8. I mean, I'm, still pretty thankful that things are good at home and health is good. And it's those small sort of new ways of reflecting on life that makes you realize there's not a lot to complain about unless there is something really big to complain about.
That's true. I think I'm probably around a 6 or a 7. I'd probably be a 7 or 8 if I would be better if I stopped watching CNN.
Fair enough.
And so if I stop paying attention to what's happening in the US, then I might be a little bit better, but I'd say about a 6 or 7. Well, thank you for making the time and having this conversation.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's such an important time for us. I'm finding that talking to kind of everyday people in their careers, trying to navigate their way, has drawn out some really incredible insights that we can offer to other leaders. 1, to make them feel they're not alone. 2, to get some creative ideas on other things they should be thinking about and doing in their leadership, but also really helpful for young people right now to kind of make sure they know there's hope. Even though things might feel dire about their future, there's hope. And maybe we'll share some stories about our lives and our careers as we got to where we are. Why don't we start a little bit with what you are doing now? What's your role right now?
So, I mean, at the end of the day, my first and foremost role is obviously as an audit partner at KPMG. I focus most of my time on, supporting my clients through their external reporting requirements.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. I think as a partner, it's a little bit more than just that. There's definitely, that is, what you would call the bread and butter of our business is, working with our clients and generating revenue. But I think what we've really realized more so in the last year has been that we're also responsible for managing the people, developing, coaching our people, supporting them, whether it be mental health support or whether it just be development support. But at the end of the day, I think my job is really to lead the people and their ability to execute for our clients. I don't think it's really just me executing for my clients. I think I would fail if I didn't do right by my people. And my people being, all the way from our staff all the way up to our managers at KPMG.
So the answer to the question, you define yourself as an audit partner in one of the largest accounting firms in the world, as well as that you are a leader of people.
Absolutely. I think anyone in that type of a position at a large firm where your biggest asset is your people, if you don't see people as part of, your top 1 or 2 priorities, then I wonder whether you're failing those individuals as they work to develop up in their careers.
Well, that's the knowledge business. I mean, you don't have any physical assets other than your any technology you own or any real estate you own. For the most part, your assets are the knowledge inside the head of your team and your people, and then your
Yeah.
ability to pass on those skills to other people is really
Yeah.
your biggest asset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're our biggest number on our income statement for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. I'm going to go back and forth in time a little bit. So that's
Mhm.
what you're doing now. I want to go way back and ask you if there's any experience either in your childhood or adolescence that you think that keeps coming back into your mind as you conduct your role as a people leader. Are there experiences in your history that kind of have set you on a course for the type of leader that you are?
If I reflect on it, I think there is definitely something in the value system. Some of it is, I think, is culturally,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it is undoubtedly how I was raised. And we were always kind of raised with low self pride,
Hmm.
which is interesting because I think what that enabled us to do is think about others more so than just think about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it allowed us to think about the importance of more than beyond maybe one KPI in any organization, which often is something around a dollar metric.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's allowed us to think beyond just dollar metrics and has made us think about the people around us, the environment around us.
Hmm.
Um, but I think of that and I go, when you walk into a business organization and you go in with low self pride, it's an interesting balance because you have to make sure that you're not being perceived as someone who doesn't care or
Hmm.
is not engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a little bit of structuring your career because I think in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning you do have to be a self advocate and you do
Mm-hmm.
have to show a level of pride whilst you may not be the boastful person walking down the
Yeah.
hall pounding your chest. But I think as you become a leader, you start to go back to those underlying qualities of
Mm-hmm.
what you believe is right. And that's when the low self pride becomes so important again, because at that
Mm-hmm.
point in time, it's not all about you. And in fact, I
Mm-hmm.
think you'll learn very quickly that if it is all about you, you're probably setting yourself up to fail pretty quickly.
Mm.
And that
Yeah.
your success is actually dependent on the people around you.
Yeah. So
And so,
that is something that you picked up growing up, this idea of low self-pride. I find it very interesting that you use the term low self-pride, where others might use the term humility. Is there a conscious decision in the choice of those words, or is that just a set of words you grew up with?
I think it's a set of words I grew up with for
Huh.
sure. But yeah, you know what? Interesting. I don't know that I've ever really in my head tried
Yeah.
to reconcile the difference. So fair, good point.
No, well, it's just interesting. It's curious because you hear the word humility and leadership a lot, but
Yeah,
usually there's a story behind a choice of words. And so
sure.
low self-pride is not something you invented. It's something that you picked up growing up. Is that
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. It was definitely something both my parents were very big on. I
Huh.
think till today, my mom will never tell anybody what I do for a living. And
Huh.
she doesn't see that as an important thing to highlight when
Hmm.
she introduces her family. For her,
Oh,
it's
that's interesting.
this is my family and
Yeah.
we're happy and we're healthy, not about what we do for a living.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure she's very proud, but she chooses not
That's right.
to share that with
Yeah.
other people. When we first met, you and I first met, I want to say it was about 8 years ago. We met
Yeah.
over lunch. I came to Toronto to meet you. You
Hmm.
were a representative for KPMG for a fundraising initiative that was sponsored by the organization I was working for,
Hmm.
Icon Foundation. And in that first meeting, I remember very early on in that conversation, you were talking about your parents and your dad specifically,
Hmm.
who at one time was a volunteer senior leader for the campaign, which the organization I just started working at
Hmm.
ran. So you had a much longer history with our organization than I did in my senior role
Yeah.
with the organization. What are some of the things you picked up from your dad, or if you remember a specific story during those years when he was volunteering and leading this effort?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I mean, we say this in organizations all of the time that if you're fortunate, you have to give. But I think to my dad, it wasn't a function of I'm fortunate, thus I must give. I think
Yeah.
my dad just saw volunteering as part of our bloodline, and it was just
Hmm.
something that everyone plays a role in. But I think to my dad, it was the passion of what he could accomplish.
Mm,
and the ability to see change in what he could single-handedly do. And
mhm,
so it was really important to him to be involved in initiatives where you could see positive change.
mhm,
And I think it was a very early on in our childhood when he would engage, myself and my friends, to be honest. So my poor dear friends, if they ever visited our home, they'd get reined in by my dad to join. But it was always like, hey, let's do this, let's work on this, but focus on what you can actually accomplish in the end. And so in this case with the foundation, it was, always focusing on what the prizes in the end that the foundation will be able to accomplish with just a little bit of your own effort. And
yeah.
I think to my dad, volunteering was just a natural part of life.
Yeah, I always find those people so remarkable. It's probably the most inspiring part of that 7 years I spent in that organization, coming in from the corporate sector, then coming into a nonprofit. That was probably the thing that inspired me the most. It's to witness volunteers that were giving their time, probably more time than they give to their professional life after hours, and not only doing the work, but passionately championing and bringing other people into the community of
Right.
doing this great work. It's just always so inspiring to see that happen. Really
Yeah,
special
no, for
people.
sure.
So that's the example you grew up with.
Absolutely, absolutely. I almost feel like my dad would have thought he would have failed us had he not kind of got us involved in that. And that's something he, passionately has been supporting us to do like all our lives, not just with the
Yeah,
foundation, but in all sorts of different ways. And
yeah.
again, being that, take your skills and find impact with your skills. And maybe
Mm,
the word here is impact. He
yeah,
felt that, you can go and work in your sort of professional life
yeah,
and build up your career, and sure, you'll get paid hopefully fairly for that.
yeah,
uh, but volunteering work had actual impact, and you
yeah.
would be able to see that impact, and that's what was important to him.
Yeah, I totally so agree with him. I so agree with him. I actually had a chance. I mean, you've told me stories about him. I actually had a chance to talk to him probably just about a year before he passed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that he passed. I hope your family's doing well, and may his soul rest in peace. But I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with him, and he was very passionate and trying to reconnect me with a past media a volunteer.
Mhm.
And really trying to get me to engage her and say, we can bring her back. We can bring her back.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was really a pleasure to talk to him at that time and have a chance for me to pay respects to the great work he's done over the years.
yeah, no,
But
sure.
really, really incredible, incredible man, and set a great example for you and for many others I know over his time. Oh, just now to switch gears a little bit into some
Mhm.
career conversations. Um, as you were thinking about what you wanted to do when you were, whether in high school or university, what are some other things you thought about doing other than what you ended up doing?
um you know what, I don't know that I ever had a serious notion of what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll bring my dad back into this because he was probably my biggest proponent through school, pushing me to think about what I wanted to do. And I think one day I may have just thrown out there like, maybe I want to be an accountant. And I think he jumped on the bandwagon, and that from that day onward, he was determined to make sure that I was going to be an accountant. Um, but I don't know that I was overly serious about anything. I'm not
Okay.
one who, I don't want to say I'm not passionate, but I'm definitely not one who kind of focuses on one thing and says, I must get there.
Yeah.
I think I was a little bit more passive. I remember
Yeah.
my grade 12 math teacher in my trigonometry unit, where I didn't do very well in that unit, said to me, I'm not sure, Farah, you're going to be a good accountant. Um, so here we go, 23 years later, if I could only find him. But anyways, um, I would tell you that I kind of went on that bandwagon because it gave me something to focus on. It allowed me to decide which universities to apply to, but I don't know that I ever passionately thought that was going to be my career. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting. But you were a pretty single track. Once you kind of the idea came into your head, that was your career path. You defined that as your path.
an extent. I mean, I
Yeah.
actually did my undergrad. I started my undergrad in economics, And
Yeah.
I slightly pivoted it then into a business degree.
Yeah.
But I would say, in the first 2 years, it definitely wasn't just single-handedly focused to an accounting stream.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
think that's the beauty of any business degree. Most people would know
Yeah.
is there's so many facets to a business degree. But I would say at the end of the day, I was eyeing myself on the candy of a job in a large accounting firm. That
Okay.
was what
Okay.
I wanted to get to, and that would allow me to continue to be able to build both my education and my ability to achieve that goal that, absent any other goal, was still going to be an accountant.
Yeah. So how long ago was it when you felt like check, goal achieved? Or did you ever have that feeling?
Good question. Actually, I would tell you, I probably didn't say check goal achieved until a number of years after I made partner.
Okay.
And again, because I think going into an accounting stream and going into a large accounting firm, 40% of our people will leave. And we
Mm-hmm.
expect that. Like a sort of just another stepping ground for people to trampoline into whatever else they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So you come in, I almost look at it as a postgraduate degree. We're another university in the first 3 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I went in just like that. I went in
Yeah.
just as another accounting student, wanting to get my designation, wanting to get my accreditation hours. And the minute I got my CA designation, I did what everyone else did. I put my resume together and I started to interview for other jobs.
Mm.
I think I just never felt in all those interviews that job was right for me.
Yeah.
Something just never clicked.
Yeah.
And I secretly didn't want to admit it, but I was actually enjoying what I was doing.
Hmm.
But I probably didn't want to admit that to myself because I had still never checked that I want to be an accountant.
Yeah. Okay.
So off I kind of continued just doing what I was doing. It was giving me a
Yeah.
decent paycheck. But it took a long time until I went, wow, I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
I actually see a sense of personal pride in what I do, as much as I say I have low self pride, but I think
Yeah.
inside of me, I recognize I do have some pride.
Yeah.
And I felt that I had accomplished something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when I realized, yes, I really did need to be an accountant, and I've
Yeah.
been successful at it, and this is my career check.
Yeah.
But it was a
Awesome.
number of years later.
Yeah. But your dad got to see you make partner.
Absolutely. He was holding that flag and saying, you got to make partner, you got to make partner. Very, very early in my career. I would have been a first year manager when he said, what are your goals? And this should be your goal, which was interesting because, I don't think I would have ever dreamt of making that my goal. It just
Yeah.
it almost didn't seem achievable either at the
Huh.
time. I joined the firm when there was 3 female partners in a group that I worked in. None of them were married. So you know what? It was also different times,
Yeah.
and it was definitely more than just it being something I wanted to do. I didn't know that it was actually something I could do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. Interesting. Interesting that your parents, there's so many different approaches to parenting, right? And
Mm,
in your case, your dad did actually prop up your goals and made sure that he knew you knew that he was there supporting you and driving you, and always count on that.
absolutely, absolutely.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about leadership, because that's something that you very
Mhm,
quickly moved from what you do for a profession, and what a big part of your role is leadership.
mhm.
How would you describe your approach to leadership?
I go back to that fundamental thing I said early in the beginning. I
Mm.
think leadership is about recognizing not that you're good at what you do, but how to help others be good at
Mm.
what you do. And success in leadership is being able to successfully bring people up in your organization.
Mhm.
The biggest pride for me is when my actual counselees have made partner at the firm. And that
Yeah.
feels really weird because I'm sitting going, wow, like clearly I'm a lot older than I want to admit. But now there's, all these individuals who I've coached and mentored over the years,
Yeah.
but now watching them become partners. And
Yeah.
I think you start to realize that as leadership, whilst you still want to be able to continue to accomplish what makes you feel good and makes you feel like
Yeah.
you've actually given something back to your clients or to the firm. But I still believe your biggest success is when your people are able to accomplish something.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know that you were sort of those arms around those individuals as they've moved up in their careers.
Yeah, I don't know if I've talked to you about this, but I've talked about in other episodes that for me a guiding image in my mind about my purpose is the concept of a drop that creates a ripple.
Hmm.
And what you just described there is exactly that feeling that you get when you know that satisfying feeling when you drop a pebble in the calm waters and you see the ripple expand. For me,
Right.
that's the same feeling that you get when you see people that you've supported or helped or encouraged go on to do great things, and in fact go on and help other people and create more ripples.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's the image. So this time that we've just been through, March 17th is the day in my head, St. Patrick's Day, when I feel like everything changed. I, had just left an organization where I was leading a number of people, but I was basically independent at that point. You were leading a
Mhm.
number of people. You had projects that were going on. March timeframe, I expect, is probably a peak period for you.
Very busy. Yeah.
Just tell me what was going on from a leadership perspective during that time.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think if you speak to different people, you'll get slightly different answers. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously from a business perspective, our first and foremost thing was to put in all our kind of, secondary systems or whatever plans that we needed to do. We called it our emergency plan that had to kick into play
Yeah.
to make sure that we could continue to service our clients.
Yeah.
And that was clearly number one at the firm.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, we had to make sure that we could take care of our people first because
Right.
they were integral to be able to service our clients.
Yeah.
So we kept trying to sit there and say, we've got all these platforms. We're able to do work from home. Thankfully, everyone in our organization has a laptop, so they can go home and work from home. But I think what you quickly have to start to figure out though is how are those people going to work from home?
Yeah.
How are you going to support them now not being able to physically watch them and
Yeah.
develop them and train them? And so I think the biggest thing for us was how are we going to keep that monitoring going?
Hmm.
And how are we going to look over and make sure that our people knew that whilst we weren't sitting across the hall from them, we were still just a phone call away.
Right.
And that was a bit of a shift because I think we've
Yeah.
probably taken it for advantage that when you're in the office, everyone is fine. We're all
Yeah.
there together. We're as a team.
Yeah.
But the minute you kind of all pack up your bags and you go home, you don't know what's on the other side. You don't
Yeah.
know what else they have to deal with or whether they even have desks in their home.
Right.
Many of our people are young students and they've graduated from university and wanting to live in downtown Toronto because it's a great place to be. But they find themselves in 550 square foot condos
Right.
and probably didn't even have a desk to work at.
Yeah.
So you start to see how important it was to really pivot what you
Yeah.
thought was your number one priority.
Yeah. How did you capture those signals or capture the information about the situation that your team is in? What's going on? I mean, I guess you must have learned who has a desk, who doesn't have a desk. What did that process look like, and how did it start?
I think the first thing was just being able to
Yeah.
share each of your experiences. You quickly started to learn that you were going to have just a lot more conversations about just general talk. It
Right.
was less about setting up a meeting where the topic was something about your client or
Right.
some accounting issue. It was setting up meetings about how are you doing,
Mm.
a question we take for granted, a question that we don't always think to ask, but it actually
Mhm.
became imperative to ask because you
Yeah.
actually wouldn't know. There
Hmm.
was no way of otherwise knowing. We don't have an inventory, a database
Hmm.
of, where everybody lives and what's the size of their footprint where they live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do they have all the tools necessary? But it really became so important to say part of your day was just merely connecting with people.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, in your 8-hour day, and we're accountable for the hours in our day we input our time, and you feel you want to input your time to a client code, well, it's equally important to input your time to a people code
Yeah.
and
Excellent.
connect with people. And that was the
Yeah.
biggest change, I would say.
Yeah. Wow. And did it snap into place very quickly for you? And was there a difference between how quickly it snapped in place for you to do that activity
Mhm.
versus the firm?
Yeah, I definitely think there was differences. I think it snapped into easy for me because I've always been a people person.
Yeah.
And I knew my role. I spent 20% of my time actually leading the HR practice for the audit function.
Oh, okay.
Now, I'm not an HR professional, so I don't deal with ERS, like employee relation matters,
Yeah.
but HR strategy is clearly something that falls under my purview.
Uh,
So for me, that was forefront in mind. It was forefront in mind, but definitely it wasn't for everyone, and
mhm.
not because they didn't care, but because you don't realize it and you
Yeah.
don't know, and it's very hard to put your shoes in someone else's to think about how they're reacting in this situation.
Yeah.
So it definitely took a while to try to get all our leaders to recognize that now there's a percentage of their time where their responsibility isn't about going to solicit new business or service your clients or do billing or read a great article in the Globe and Mail. It was calling upon our people,
Yeah.
calling our people and connecting with our people.
What were the conversations like? Because it sounds like you're responsible for HR for the audit team. So that means you must sit on some form of management team. Am
That's
I
right.
correct?
Yeah, we have our GTA audit leadership team
Yeah.
where we have various different leaders, and I play the HR role on that
And
table.
what are some of the other functions on that team?
A lot of them are more business functions, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, we do have people who are sort of responsible for quality in what we do, because that's absolutely imperative in a regulatory environment. But most of the other roles are business functions, industry
Okay.
leaders,
Yeah.
and leaders who are responsible to run a P&L,
Ah, okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so their focus goes back to financial metrics. That's
Yeah.
what they're responsible for.
Yeah.
And here I'm coming around and I'm just making them explode their financial metrics, because I'm saying, well, it's not about making sure that in those 8 hours you're booking your time to a client code so you can bill for
Yeah.
each of those 8 hours, that 1 hour that you spend with people actually has more value than what you might charge to a client.
Yeah.
Now, whilst that sounds silly because one's going to go, what dollars are we getting? It's the intrinsic value that you have to start to really champion and
Yeah.
talk about how much value there was in that intrinsic value. Because if we didn't have our people, we would not be able to earn a dollar from our clients. That
Yeah.
was the
Yeah.
reality of it.
Yeah.
It
And
sounds extreme, but
yeah.
it was important.
Did you feel that most of your colleagues got it like right away as soon as you started talking about it, or did it take some time to kind of get everybody to
Yeah.
change practices or do things differently?
I wouldn't say everyone got it right away.
Yeah.
I think the first initial thought was our people will be fine. We've given
Mm,
everybody a laptop. They're
mhm,
fine.
mhm.
So I think it did take a bit of time. It took a bit of time um, to settle in their own ways, to start to recognize how different this was going to be and
Yeah.
what a change it was going to be. And you said something earlier, right, which you're right. Like when this happened at the peak of our business period.
Right.
We were in the middle of deadlines. And quite frankly, I'm not sure we had time to think about how to change our ways and
Yeah.
how important it was to do different things. So, at first, the onset was, oh my God, we got to get through these year-end audits because we've got deadlines to
Yeah.
accomplish.
Yeah.
And what if we don't make these deadlines? What was going to happen? And we actually didn't realize how acceptable it was to call up our client and say, I'm not going to make this deadline.
Hmm.
Because we never do that. That's
Yeah.
just, it's wrong. You don't
Yeah.
do that.
No, right.
Talk about
Professional
that.
services firms are like, that's it, right? You're driven by whatever your client needs to do, you do it, right?
Yeah. So I would say it probably didn't kick in right away. It actually took a lot of time, a number of months for us to realize that this was more than just meeting our client deadlines, that actually our bigger issue would be if we didn't take care of our people.
Right.
And so I would probably say we got better at it once the summer came around, but it was not a light bulb that went off in the first few days.
Yeah. And how about now? Do you feel like you're a stronger leadership team now than you might have been right away or even before the pandemic?
Yeah, I definitely think we're a much stronger leadership team. We collaborated more than we've ever collaborated. One would say maybe too much because we were on the phone with each other every other
Yeah,
morning.
yeah,
I actually learned to wake up a lot earlier in the morning so that we can fit in all these kinds of meetings in. But we spent more time collaborating. We spent more time sharing ideas. We spent more times kind of just getting rid of the status quo and thinking outside of the box.
yeah,
So I definitely think we've built a lot more strength in our leadership.
yeah.
I think we have done a lot more for our people, but I don't think we're done yet.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think what we realized is that as each day continues, having to work differently with still the same high expectations of, trying to achieve business metrics. Because I mean, all of this said, we still have just as ambitious goals in our
Yeah,
business.
yeah.
But that it is something that we need to continue to spend more time with our people and find ways of
Hmm.
how to interact with our people. And the new buzzword that we've actually identified in the last few weeks is boundaries.
Hmm.
How to set boundaries for our people.
Hmm.
Uh, as you know, coming to work and leaving work was a boundary.
Right, right.
Now you're at home. And
Yeah,
so, I can keep my laptop on 24/7. I mean, why go through that process of pushing the button on the side and waiting for this thing to shut down? Like, it's just not necessary. But
yeah.
we've been talking about a lot of more around boundaries and how we as leaders set boundaries, and how we hope that that will allow our people to set boundaries.
Oh, that's a great conversation to have. So, if you were to identify one or two pieces of advice on things you've learned, practical tips on how to set boundaries working from home, what would those be?
Uh, Definitely for me, my work calendar is like my calendar. It has become a Farah calendar and not just a KPMG calendar.
Yeah.
Actually, what's the most fun for me right now, my daughters won't admit it, but while they're home right now, gym class is something that you have free time to, and it's kind of on trust. Go do your own physical activity.
Yeah.
So my daughter and I have decided that we're actually putting her gym class into my calendar. So every
Oh,
time she has a phys ed, whether it be from 3 to 4 today or whatever it is, it's in my calendar, and so we'll do a class together, and so I can easily just get up from my desk and throw on my gym shirt and go work out, and just as easily come back. There is really very minimal commute time.
that's
Um,
fantastic.
so
That's a great
that's
tip.
one thing. I think I've integrated my life and my life calendar with my family.
Yeah.
Um, so now it's more than just, like I said, a work calendar. It's really a Farah calendar. Um, the other thing
That's
that
a really cool example. Yeah.
the other thing I did, I mentioned it to somebody at work the other day, and they started to laugh. And I said, I go out and I take a lot more 5-minute breaks for what I call a giggle. And
A giggle break. A giggle
it,
break. That's
it really
awesome.
is a giggle break, and it's my ability to just see my kids. And look, I've always worked crazy hours, and so I've always only had quality time, but very little quantity time with my
Yeah.
children,
Yeah.
particularly in a given day. And I still work long hours today. It's not like I'm working any less. I'm probably working more,
Hmm.
uh, but I'm spending more time giving them the 5 minutes of what I call time, and
Hmm.
just kind of being able to go see their faces, laugh with them. And that kind of uplifts my mood to be able to then come back and do another, number of hours behind my desk. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. One thing that's kind of started happening here in the last week, I've got my office set up in the basement, but I've noticed that my son will do his first class online in his room, and then he'll come down to make himself breakfast. And while he's making himself breakfast, he will participate in his second class. And
Oh,
his second class is international relations. And so I'm hearing his teacher talking, I'm hearing him talking, I'm hearing his student, as his classmates talking about various issues. And one of the issues they're talking about is Canada's involvement in Afghanistan.
wow.
And so, which is really neat because, of course, as you know, in the organization I used to work for and you volunteer for, I
Yeah,
mean, that was one of the things we talked a lot about is
right.
Canada's role in development in Afghanistan. So I now take a pause when he's doing that class and I'll go up and make myself a coffee so I can hear about what they're talking
Yeah.
about. And then we continue a conversation afterwards. And it's become a really, really fulfilling part of my day, actually.
Right, right. And I think it is kind of neat how we can integrate each other's lives a little bit more. And,
Yeah.
I'm part of her phys ed class, and sometimes my children find they're part of my day job because they hear me on calls all the time. So they know
Yeah.
more about what I do than ever before.
That's great. It'll be very interesting to see how all of this experience translates into their view of work and parenting when they're of that age.
Absolutely,
And these memories.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be
Fascinating.
interesting to watch also how we pivot and how we all work after
Yeah.
this as well, right?
Yeah.
So,
One of the things that I'm thinking a lot about, I don't lead a lot of people like I used to, but I have a role in the community where I have to lead people. And one of the things that's really on my mind is the mental health of
mm,
those people because yeah, you can say here, this is how I'm doing on a scale of 1 to 10, and you can try to make it comfortable for people to talk about what they're worried about, what they're anxious about. But there's no real secret to actually looking after everybody's mental health. I know mental health is a big area of
mhm.
priority for you too. What have you learned about looking after mental health of people during this time?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely become a topic that's raised sort of the bar in terms of importance. But the one thing I would say though is we used to look at mental health as, look for signs of somebody who's going through mental health issues.
Yeah.
Make sure that you can identify and make create awareness on it so that nobody feels like it's a taboo topic. But
Right.
I think what I've more and more realized is mental health is something that's important for everyone.
Mm,
It's not just there's going to be 3 or 4 people in your organization who are going to suffer from mental health. We all have to be thinking about mental health. Now, agreed, there's different severities of how one will sort of undergo mental health challenges, and the more severe it comes, you have to put some more support mechanisms around it. But we have to start to look at it just from a scale of everyone.
right.
Everyone is going through massive change today. Watching CNN actually is sometimes I think is worse for your mental health than
It's
anything.
true. True.
And so what we've learned to do is just be more comfortable to talk about it and even the simple aspects of it.
Yeah.
You don't have to have the extreme situations to talk about mental health. I think
Yeah.
we each know or are learning more about what are our own triggers,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
are our own down days, and what those are about. So,
Yeah.
talking about it from the lowest level of extremity actually is now making it much more impactful in that it's not just a small group of people, it's everyone.
Right.
So a lot more discussions around it, and trying to create just I guess I would say almost more activities around it, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
we're thinking more about mindful activities now in a workday,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And how to kind of adapt that, taking your teams. So we have some of our engagement teams, and we've actually challenged them to say that we'll increase your healthy snack budget because we like to give everybody healthy snack budget
Yeah.
by the more mindful activities that you implement in a day.
Huh. Huh.
So really just making this about everyone and making it about our daily lives than
Yeah.
just having to focus on the extremities of mental health.
Yeah. Such great progress, I think, that's happened in the work world in the last several years. I mean, I remember, what you just talked about was the idea of making it acceptable for people to share even the smallest concerns of anxiety and stress. I mean, it, the years that I was coming up and maybe the years you're coming up, I think we're about the same age. Maybe you're a little bit younger than me, is that, the kind of general phrase was, suck it up, right?
Yeah, it
If
was.
you're,
It
if this
was.
is a challenge or you're stressed or there's too much work, just suck it up and get through it. And it's almost so opposite to that now.
Yes.
And I think that's a good thing. I just wonder if it's pervasive. Like I'm seeing it being very acceptable now. You're saying seeing it being very acceptable now. I wonder if it'll cascade throughout all of society.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely acceptable, but is everybody willing to still talk about it is still different. I
Right.
think there is still a sense of it can be seen as a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
I still think there is a lot more learning that and training that needs to be done on how one reacts in conversations.
Yeah.
So I still believe there's a lot more work to be done.
Yeah.
Whilst definitely it is a word that we talk about a lot and we spend a lot of time on, I don't think we're quite there in terms of our support systems around
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's true, right? I mean, nonverbal cues. I mean, you could um, as a leader be taught that you have to be tolerant and accepting of people's anxiety, but if you are a person that actually deep down wants to say suck it up, it oftentimes will show up in the facial expression. So it's really hard to deprogram those things, isn't it?
It is. It is. It is.
Yeah.
And I think because some of us, grew up with that suck it up mentality because that was the way to persevere and succeed.
Yeah.
You have to deprogram what you thought was your success versus what you think, now the next person's success is going to look
It's
like.
true. It's true. So what would be if you were to identify one or two things to share with other leaders, your peers, your colleagues, and other organizations, what would be your piece of advice as we're navigating the next few years?
I think more and more what you'll start to see is people are going to want to be able to reflect more on their own self health,
Yeah,
their own kind of well being in life. I
yeah,
think this pandemic has taught us that, we can go, 150% all day long, trying to achieve some sort of, big goals, whether it be, career goals or financial goals or whatever it is. But all of that can come in a moment's stop. And I think we realized that on March 17th, the world
yeah,
came to a crashing halt.
yeah,
And the reflection for a lot of people was, wow, I value my life so much more now and so much differently. So I think when we think about, what are our top KPIs in an organization, if people aren't a part of those KPIs, I actually think we're going to be doing a mistake.
yeah,
I think we need to start to think more about the day in the life of an individual and not so much around financial remuneration or other benefits as what drives people to work.
yeah,
So I think it's going to be a little bit of a fundamental shift on
yeah,
how we interact with each other and how we treat each other.
yeah.
And I really believe that will be a big change.
So given that you're at an accounting firm, do you see a role, or is it already happening, a role for firms like yours to play in helping organizations come up with those kinds of metrics or ways of evaluating organizational health around people?
Absolutely. I mean, we're an accounting firm per se, but we're actually a lot more than that. We are a consulting firm. I mean, we have a very large advisory practice, and one of a big unit in our advisory practice is what we call people and change, right?
Ah,
And it's all about culture and changing culture and how to manage the asset of it being your people.
yeah,
So I definitely see we have a role to play. We employ ourselves, over 10,000 people across the country.
yeah,
So we have our own examples to be able to glean in on, but we've got, various people who I think focus in on, just that, I almost call them psychologists as as business consultants, right? And
yeah,
thinking of the psychology of people and how it's going to adapt as we move into the future.
yeah. I think this interesting space field, and I'm sure there's people out there that practice it, but the integration of accounting and psychology and organizational health probably going to be a very interesting field that might grow in the next little while.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think if we're not realizing that
Yeah,
there's going to be a need for change, then I think we're going to find ourselves in a lot of trouble.
yeah, awesome. Farah, thank you so much for this
Oh,
very interesting conversation. You satisfied a bunch of curiosities for me, and I think you've added a lot of value to my listeners. And really appreciate you taking the time out of what is a very busy day to
no,
do this.
my pleasure. No, thank you so much for the opportunity. It was great. It was great speaking to you.
Yeah, wishing you all the best. Have a fantastic day,
Thank
and,
you.
and enjoy your daughter's physical
Yeah,
education class.
absolutely. This will convert very quickly soon.
All right, take
All right.
care. All the
Take
best.
care.
All right,
Bye.
bye. There's only one big takeaway for me from this episode. You know, when I started in professional services, when I left business school, it was management consulting. There was a really big emphasis on clients come first. And that was basically code language for we do whatever it takes. We work the long hours, we turn on a dime, we just make it happen for the clients. I mean, that's the crux of professional services. And I think what's happened over the years is with the focus on mental health, which we didn't at all talk about back in those days, then this recognition that Farah emphasizes that in order to serve clients to the best of your ability, you have to be in good shape, mentally and physically. You know, there was a time that when mental health was talked about, it was an additional thing to worry about. It was something on the side that you have to worry about in addition to worrying about the other things like serving clients. What Farah talked about in this episode is the actual causal relationship between the two. You can't deliver for your clients if your people are not feeling well. And that is something that really was emphasized during this last year as we have been dealing with the pandemic. Looking after our people first so that then they can look after the clients. Take that away and think about how that impacts your business and how it impacts your leadership. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, or share it. I want to say thank you to one of my favorite bands, Late Night Conversations, for sharing their song Chaos with me and letting me use it in this episode. You can learn more about them on Instagram at LNC Connected. And here's more of their song Chaos to take you out.
Far behind my eyes, mediation, suffocation, it'll break me. Information in disguise. But when your eyes finally found mine, you were there, but I'm defined by the chaos in my mind. I believe what I perceive is a weave tearing at the seams, and I wonder what's behind. And my ears are bleeding, and the reasonings and the logic of the season, taking the pleasing from my soul and leaving me to die. And I feel the lacing, LNC like racing, unstationary animation taking me